Hello, LA232. At the end of Wednesday's class, I mentioned that I would show you something, and that is how to get the in-class exercise file into your assignment file if you wanted to use it for that. You don't have to, but if you'd like to. There's a little trick to get it into this 1600 by 1600 pixel Photoshop file, which is what your assignment needs to be submitted as. You can check the file size from image size and make sure this is set to pixels. How do I know that is what the final file size should be? Well, I just decided that it should be that, and it is mentioned in the a1.pdf assignment write-up, which you can access here. You can also access this sample deliverable that I'll be working off of. So let's jump right in. You can fast forward this video if you want to see how to get that into this one file, because I don't want you to submit multiple files. I just want one Photoshop file that is structured very similar to this. And there's a little trick to do it. Like I mentioned, fast forward, or if you'd like to watch, I'll go through the process one more time of how to do this masking. There's a lot of ways to do it, and Justin seems like a good sport, so we'll go ahead and use his photo. I'll jump right in, and I'm going to start by cropping this down. I didn't do this during class. I did do it in the very, very fast video that I uploaded right here. So you'll see in a much slower fashion many of the things I did to create this entourage scene. So back to Photoshop. I've cropped this down. I haven't destructed, even though I've made the file size smaller, I haven't destroyed any pixels that I want to keep. So that is fine. Now I can use the magic wand tool to do this selection. I can use the select by color range, and I believe there's one more, but we'll just worry about those two for the time being. Oh yeah, I guess you know what it is? It's the quick selection tool. And actually we'll be using that one in a few minutes, but we'll start with the magic wand tool. I'll set my tolerance to 60. That works well when you've got a pretty good chunks of a very different color. And I will first select contiguous. This is review, but for what it's worth, if I were to click, it only finds pixels that are connected by one other pixel. And if there's little islands of that same color down here, they will not be selected. Let me deselect by doing a Command D or Control D if you are on Windows. Deselect that, click again, and you'll see little islands get selected. So that's the difference between contiguous and not contiguous. I'll go ahead and, you know what, I'll leave it unchecked, because I'm pretty sure it's not going to accidentally pick up anything inside of here. Now what I'll do is hold down Shift to do an additive select, and I can zoom in and kind of get this clean up. That's kind of nice because with that mode selected, it gets little islands like this, and there's a speck. Do I want to get that? I hope it didn't get anything else. Looks good. Got down here, and that one might be pushing it, but oops, see, that was too far because it's starting to pick up a range in his pants. But what I could do is now I could dial this down. So I'll do 20, hit Tab, hold down Shift, and click right here. All right, that's looking pretty good. Now, there's some more, there's some more, and this should be getting most of the green, I would hope. All right, that looks pretty good, except for that spot. Oh, and the reason it's doing this is because I've now got this down to 20. Let's drag that back up to 60. Watch these last few islands here. As I hold down Shift and click, that should be pretty good. Notice that it's overlapping a little bit. That is fine. This just needs to be close, and it's that refine edge where the money is really at. Now, I could refine the edge right now, or I could do it after the mask is created. Either is fine. All right, so I will go ahead and turn this background layer into a normal layer just by double-clicking on it. Click the mask button, and this happens sometimes. You maybe saw this when I was creating the video down here. And if this happens, you need to invert the selection, or I'm sorry, inverse the colors. And you do that by Control I. And that just swaps. Everything that's black is now white, and the other way around. That's different then swapping your selection. Now, if you click on selection, and if I happen to have, yeah, there's inverse. Inverse is what you do to a selection. Invert is what you do to colors, and the shortcut is slightly different. But now that I've got something like this, I can hit D on my keypad just to make sure that my colors down here are black and white. The reason I like to hit D is because sometimes you might have a little, like a dark gray that in this context looks like it's black, but it's not. So I would actually be creating a transparency. So I can either click that, make sure that is all the way in the corner, or hit D on the keyboard to make sure that that is black. And if you hit X on the keyboard, it brings that to the foreground. You can also click this little arrow right there. All right, why am I doing this? Because now I want to grab my paintbrush, make sure my mask is highlighted, and if you don't have the right size brush, you can hit your left and right brackets. If you don't have the right type of brush, you can right click and select it here. You don't want a real fuzzy brush. That's going to do something like that. So I will right click, get that hard edged brush. You can also make those adjustments right here. All right, so all I'm doing is painting black on that layer mask just to block out as much as I can get. All right, that looks all right. Is there anything up there? No, that's pretty good. All right, how do I get the legs? Now, the legs and the feet get a little bit tricky, and that's perfectly fine. I didn't want to do a perfect green screen. I wanted to make you work a little bit on this exercise file. Sometimes it's easier to bring back what you want rather than to remove what you don't want. So we're adding one extra step, but at the end of the day, it's actually saving some time. So what I will do is grab the marquee tool, select everything right to there, and click on here, do an Alt Delete. So there you go. You ain't got no legs, Lieutenant Justin. All right, that's my horrible Forrest Gump impersonation. Maybe I'll edit that out in post. Maybe I'll keep it. I'll see how I feel. All right, how do we get his legs back? Well, we can disable this layer mask, do a Command D to deselect, or you can go up here if you're lazy, select, and then select deselect. And this time I will bring up the quick selection tool. Here's kind of a weird little thing about the quick selection tool. It inherits the tolerance set when you have the magic wand selected. So if there's colors that are close, notice down here that the shoe is kind of brown and the ground is kind of brown, so they're pretty close. You probably want your tolerance a little bit lower. So I'll type 20 and hit tab, then click and hold on the magic wand, and then highlight the quick selection tool. It works just like the paintbrush. You can make it larger or smaller with your brackets. And it's pretty easy. You just kind of keep painting, and then it's kind of nice. Let go from your mouse button from time to time. So I'm not holding down my mouse button because now I can, whoops, yeah, I went too far. But because I'm doing multiple little selections, I can do an undo at this point and see if I can't get that a little bit. There we go. All right. Oh, I'm using my arrow keys. You don't want to do that. Oh, and look at that. It kind of picked up a little spot right there. So I'm going to start over. Undo or Control D. So there's a little spot there. If you hold down the Control, or it's a option on a Mac, I think it's Alt on a Windows, that's a subtraction tool. Now if I let go, I'm back to my normal selection tool. It's a little bit trial and error. Again, the key is just to be close. It doesn't need to be perfect. Oops, that was too much, so I'm going to undo. And this time I'm just going to do a couple little clicks instead. I'll make that smaller. Whoops, too far. And too far again. You know, and if you get down to areas like this, I'm going to undo because I just can't quite get that shoe part. And can I get this part right here? Let's see how lucky I get. No, so undo. That's okay. If you really need to get surgical, grab your polygonal lasso tool. And you can hold on Shift. Shift is that universal add to selection. Double click to close. So down here I'm going to hold down Shift, and I'm just clicking. Granted, I'm making a polygonal angular selection, but I'm zoomed in so far you're never really going to see this. And when we do the refine mask, it'll clean it up anyway. Double click, it adds to that selection. Now right here we need to subtract this. So I've still got my polygonal lasso. I'll hold down the Alt key. Very conveniently the icon turns to a little minus. And we can get rid of that sliver. Double click. There we go. So that looks pretty good. Oh, except for this part of his shoe down here. Spacebar will invoke the pan tool, so that is what I did there. This is kind of nice because I'm really mixing and matching a few tools here. The pan tool is a subtool that I'm bringing up even while I've got my polygonal tool selected. Let's zoom in here, hold down Alt, and just click away. Double click when you get in the safe zone. And this one I wanted to select an additive selection, so hold down Shift, and there's a little sliver of a shoe right there. Double click. Alright, that looks pretty good. I will re-enable my background layer, or my mask layer, and I want to do a Control Delete because Control is in the background. Does it work? Boom. There we go. Now I'll do Command D to deselect. Almost there. You know, maybe some people would call this good, and I would zoom in and see this weird jaggedy pixeled edge and say bad. We want to do refine edge. This is the kind of fun, easy part. Right click over the mask, refine mask, not refine edge, that's what it says up here. And it doesn't hurt to zoom in. Now if you're too good at this, you're not going to find an area that you actually need to refine. I'm making my computer think a little bit too hard at the moment here. Oops, there we go. So it jumped in. All right, so take a look up here. It's a little bit rough. Let's change these settings. It depends on the type of image and the resolution that you're working off of. Really trial and error. More times than not, you don't need a lot of resolution right here. Now, another tool is by default active when you're doing this, and it's the enhance or refine selection. It also has a negative mode, so if you hold down Alt, you'll see it turn into a minus. By default, you're telling Photoshop to pay more attention. I should have picked a student with longer flowing hair because that's the tool you really want to use this on. So just imagine that he had hair flowing out here. You would take this and kind of paint on top of it, click over it, and it would clean up. We'll use this little sliver of his jacket here. As I click and drag, I'm just saying, hey Photoshop, pay a little bit more attention to that. It doesn't really work as well in this context, so I'm going to undo that. And I'm going to try the other way around. So I'll hold down Alt and I'll say, you know what, make this a little bit tighter of a selection. And look at that, it kind of refined the edge. So this is kind of nice. Usually with these two tools, I'll use it on the hair in the plus mode, and then I'll just kind of quickly touch up shoulders and other areas that need a harder edge. Now, I forgot to hold down Alt, so I'm going to hit undo. Holding down Alt, notice the tool is now at a minus. And there we go. So notice that edge gets cleaned up a little bit more. There's a little bit of green up here. Can I fix that? I probably don't even need to. Whoops, see, now that got too hard of an edge. That's a situation where we'll just worry about it when we decontaminate. So I'm going to hit undo. You know, for the most part, it's pretty good. Maybe his shoes could use a little. Oh, there's a little bit of a background area. I'll fix that here in a moment. But notice this is kind of too fuzzy of an edge. So what I'll do is I've still got this tool highlighted. Hold down Alt and watch what happens. We'll try that side. Look how it gets a little bit sharper. So use your discretion to decide, you know, how much or how little you want to refine your masks. That's pretty good. Keeping in mind, you're probably not going to be zoomed in that far too much. All right, this looks pretty good. Now I did notice there was a little bit of green haloing up here. That's not too bad. You could dial up your decontaminate colors a little bit more. You know what, that's so minor, I don't think it'll ever register. Hopefully it won't, but so this looks good. I'll hit OK. Now keep in mind that I forgot about or noticed this little area I needed to fix down here. That's pretty easy to fix. We're still just dealing with a mask. If I disable that mask and re-enable it, you can see that it's just a mask on top of a layer. So what I'll do is highlight that. I'll do the polygonal tool, and I'm going to just use the default tool, kind of select that area, double click, and hit a Alt Delete to fill that up. Here's a situation, I'm going to undo that a couple times, where you might actually want to use a brush with a fuzzy edge. So let's do this. I've undone that selection, got the layer mask highlighted. I'll hit B to bring up my brush. It's very big right now, so I got to hit my brackets to make it smaller. And I'm going to right click and drag the hardiness. And that what that does is it puts a little fuzzy edge on it. So why am I doing it? Well, just because that's kind of what it looks like the style of this mask is at anyway. It kind of has a little bit of a fuzzy edge. I don't want it to be too jarring. All right, so looks pretty darn good, right? Let's go ahead and now for your assignment, you can get rid of this layer right here. The reason it created another layer is because Photoshop had to do a destructive process. So it's retaining your original, and that little destructive process has to do with the edge that was added when we were tweaking some of the settings. That's why there's a little bit of a extra layer around his fingers compared to this one. Let's compare these two. See that? So just know that's why I did it. That is acceptable for this assignment. What I don't want is to see this one destructed. So I don't want to see any paint job over here, even though you wouldn't see that when the mask is on, because when I'm looking at these, I'm going to be disabling your mask and seeing something like this. So let's enable the mask, and let's undo a couple times. There we go. Okay, how do we get this into our assignment? Let me show you how to do that. The easiest way is to have both files open side by side. You can arrange them from the window menu. So I can tile these vertically. I can tile horizontally. Don't have a whole lot of options with only 2 images, but you get the idea. So let's do the vertical again. Bring the one you want to drag from into focus. And what I mean by that is just have it highlighted. This one is in focus, this one is not. Then anywhere on your layer, drag it over to your other file. Now here's a little trick. Hold down Shift and that will keep it in the center. I'm holding Shift, dragging it over here, and then I let go. Now you might get a little profile mismatch. That's okay for this example. You'll also notice that it is larger than the 1600 by 1600 pixels. How do you fix that? Well, let's go ahead and let's move this one off to the side. We don't need that one anymore. We need to make this smaller. So what I'll do is a Command or a Control T if you're on Windows, which most of you are. And that brings up my transform tool. A little bit of review. We did this in class as well. Now, very important, hold down Shift before you start to drag, because if you don't, it will distort probably your drawing. And I can see another error here that I need to fix. I'm going to undo that and hit Escape. You want to make sure that your layer mask and your layer are linked. Notice these have a link, these do not. All I need to do is click somewhere in between. Now those will be linked. So if I were to do the Control T once again, here's what happens if I start to drag and then I'm like, oops, Matt said to hold on Shift. I better do that. So I'll hold on Shift. Oh, that does work. Okay, never mind. That'll work too. You can do it after the fact. I thought it would lock that squished version. So just hold down Shift and make this so it fills most of the height. Don't do this. That's too small. That's too big. Right about there. That looks pretty good. Then hit return or enter to register. The one other thing you need to do is clean up the mask. I want every part of this to be black. Everything in your layer mask that you do not want to show should be black. And if I had a background, I'll just turn this one off. Turn that on. So you can see, actually, you know what, never mind. Just trust me. I thought that would show something through, but let's see here. Here's what I really mean. I just want you to clean up all of this, so I can do that with a couple big selections. I'll select this area, watch my layer mask, just general good housekeeping. And I did a couple alt deletes to fill that up. Okay, this is still a working file, so this is good to save and just archive as a working file. As long as it stays a .psd, it will not compress or degrade. But if you wanted to use this in something else, you would probably want to save this as a PNG, because that will flatten it. It will retain the transparency, but it does not include the layer mask. So just generally keeps it as a more efficient file. And I'll go ahead and why not? Give it a name, hit save, hit OK. Now that file will be saved. Alright, so this one is pretty much done. This is the file you would want to save, not the flat version, that was just as an example. Save this as anything you want and in .psd. You don't have to include your name, because when you upload it from Blackboard, I will know it came from you. Here's where you upload it. On Blackboard once again, click on Assignments, click on Assignment 1, the words, and go ahead and hit Browse My Computer, make your selection, upload it. Here's the rubric, incidentally, also in the PDF if you'd like to review that. A good practice would be to upload this and then come back and download it, or even download it from another computer just to make sure that it opens up okay. It is your responsibility to make sure that these files are technically correct. All right, we can stop there. That's all you really need to see. Little bonus part here. I showed this in class as well, and it's kind of neat, so I thought I'd show you again. And that is to create an Entourage SketchUp Face Me component. So this is not a part of the assignment. This is just extracurricular for your benefit. We may or may not do this later on in the class. I'm going to go through it kind of quick, so use your pause and rewind quite liberally. To get this into SketchUp, first we need to get it into Illustrator. Before we do that, we need to create a work path that we can send to Illustrator. Before we can do that, we need to make a selection. We've been making selections for a while now. Here's another way you can do it. With your marquee tool, hold down Control or Command on a Mac and click on a layer, and it will create a selection from that layer. If I do the same thing on the tree, if I do it on this one, you can see what it does. I'm just holding down Control as I click. Now, there's something a little weird here. It's making a selection outside of my box, and it has something to do with how I brought this into the file. You might think, oh, well, that's easy to get rid of. I'll just grab my marquee tool, hold down Alt to bring up the selection, and there we go. But it will not work. Again, something kind of weird. So another little trick here I will introduce is to hold down Shift and Option at the same time. Remember, Shift is plus, adds to the selection, minus subtracts to it. Well, what does Shift and Alt do at the same time? It basically says select from this selection, but only from this selection. Just trust me, it'll work. With these two keys held down, I will drag over the part I want to keep, making sure not to select those other two pieces. There we go. Just another way to creatively deselect. Once you've got this, I'll go ahead and drag my paths over here. You can also access your paths from the Window Paths menu option. And there's a button right here. It's called Create Work Path. Click on that. There we go. Paths function very similar to layers. You can have as many as you want. and you can name them. It's kind of like a saved selection, but it's a vector shape. It's a vector editable shape. Once you've got a work path, you want to go to File, Export Paths to Illustrator. And you can save it, click OK. This just creates an Illustrator file. I'll put this in that same folder. Now you can jump over to Illustrator, File, Open, that file, hit OK. Now you won't see anything, but if you do a Command or Control A, you will see that there actually is a selection in here. This doesn't zoom the same way as Photoshop. You have to hold down, I believe it's Alt, while you scroll to zoom in and out. We'll worry about Illustrator later. The trick is to get it into Illustrator, and it's a fairly quick trip because all we're going to do is select that, File, Export, and this time I'm going to select AutoCAD or DWG. We'll put that in the same folder. Now the version doesn't really matter. Don't do the absolute newest one. We're just working with some dumb geometries here, so you can go 2004, perfectly fine. I believe if it's a very simple drawing, the defaults should be okay. So I'll hit OK. Then I'm going to hop over to SketchUp, and I was already playing around with this earlier, so let's go ahead and create a new file. I'm going to go File, Import. Did I mention you have to have SketchUp Pro to do this? If you do not see AutoCAD files, it means you do not have the Pro version of SketchUp, which you need to have. And I'm going to select that drawing. I'll hit Options. You want this to be fairly large, so don't set it to millimeters. We'll do feet. We'll fix this in a moment, but millimeters, not so good. Hit feet, hit OK, hit Import. It'll think for a moment, and hopefully you'll see something like this. And why can't I pan? There we go. Pan, there we go. SketchUp also will be doing more later on in the semester. Now I'm going to import that image file. And what's kind of neat about this, you don't even need a transparent image. So do you know what? I'm going to go back over here. I'll show you two things. Sorry, this is going to get a bit long, but it will hopefully pay off. I'm going to import the flatjustin.png, which is right here. Now let's kind of put them about the same size. And I'm also going to import a non-masked version of Justin. So let's go ahead and save this really quick. JPEG is fine. Even though I had transparency in this file, watch what happens when I import it into SketchUp. It converts it to white because JPEGs cannot contain transparency. All right, why am I doing all this? Well, you might, get this far and just think, well, that's fine. I don't need to do all this other junk because I've kind of got my little model of Justin that I can see through and all is right with the world. The downside to this is when you turn on shadows, because it will either treat this as a non-shadow casting entity or it creates a shadow that's a big block, neither of which work very well. So the whole point of what we're doing here is to give us something we can create sort of accurate shadows from. So, let me get rid of that, let me get rid of that. And how do we get these to the same size? That's the next thing we need to do. Well, you can resize really easily in SketchUp with the tape measure tool. Again, little caveat here, I know this is all kind of sort of advanced stuff if you're not used to SketchUp, but maybe you are and it makes perfect sense. All right, how do we resize something with the tape measure tool? You simply measure it. So I'll measure from the top of Justin's hat down to here. You just want to measure a known value. Doesn't really matter how straight it is, just as long as you know what it is. And you know what? I think Justin is about 6 feet 8 inches, right? So I'll type that in, hit enter. You'll be prompted if you want to resize the model. I'll hit yes. So now everything is resized based off of this. But if I were to remeasure that, if you look in the lower right hand corner, you'll see that measurement is perfectly accurate. This one is not, however, because this is relative to the size of this image. How do we only resize this? You want to create a group or a component. So I will select that, right click, and do a make group. Now if I double click on that group, this box is telling you that you're editing the group. So that's kind of a little protection box, meaning anything I do in here won't affect the stuff outside of it. So now I'll measure once again from the top of his hat down to his toe. And I will type 6 feet 8 inches, hit enter. Do you want to resize the active group or component? Previously, it said the whole model. Now we're only doing the component. And while I'm in here, I want to get rid of that construction line. Click out in white space, and now I just need to line these up. I'll zoom in here, grab my move tool. I'm going to click right here. And it's not perfect, but for SketchUp standards, it's not bad either. All right, select tool, highlight both of those, right click, and explode. It'll think for a moment. All right, there it went. All right, so now I can grab my eraser tool, get rid of that, get rid of that. I'll zoom in. Oh, that part's already gone. That's good. All right, now I need to select all of this, and I'm just using my mouse. My middle wheel button will take me into orbit mode. Grab my rotate tool, click and hold, let go. For the third or fourth time, I know this is kind of advanced, but if you can follow along, that is great. If not, you'll get a chance later on. It's pretty close, but you know, we want him to always face the camera, and we want this to be a component. So I will select all of that, right click, make component. A couple of really important settings here. Get in the habit of naming these. It will make your life easier when you get lots and lots of components. Set to always face camera, and it's a good idea to set your component axes. This is where this component will rotate around. If you do not do this, weird things happen. So I'll do that toe and hit create. Now as I orbit, kind of looks like he's pirouetting around that toe. And in your component browser, you've got all the Justins you would ever dream to have for your SketchUp models. There you go. There's the little bonus part of my video. If you watched it, congratulations. If not, that's cool. We'll get a chance to do this later. Oh, one little final thing, a bonus on top of a bonus. There's no end to the bonus parts of these videos. Notice that it has this black edge all the way around. If you do not want that, you need to edit this component, then edit it again, or I'm sorry, double click on it, hold down Shift, click once. That only gets you the edge, then right click and select hide. Now that has gone away. Hit escape a bunch of times, and there you go. No more dark edge. All right, I'll see you guys on Monday.